Bonjour everyone, Pantoufleee here today for a new video in which we're going to talk a little bit about the super buff, the super heavies of tier 10, especially the Germans, received. Basically, Wargaming intended to buff those tanks to make it even harder to penetrate. Let me show you what they touch before we get into the heat of the battle. When you take a look at the mouse, nothing seems to change, and that's logic because they only changed the statistics but not the aesthetic. But first thing first, this big plate at the front of the tank that you see right now, it got buffed on two sides. Here, right there, between the one that links the front part and the side part, and they did that on the two sides because back in the days, or I should say back in the 7.6 update, you could easily penetrate those. The second thing they changed about the tank is its gun mantlet. Basically, from time to time, and they did that on also on the 100 and the VK, but basically from time to time you could eventually penetrate the gun mantlet of the mouse, which is something that should not happen. First thing first, because that tank is the most armored at tier 10, but not only for that, also because it's a super heavy, and super heavy shouldn't, at least in this game, penetrated into their gun mantlet. Even if it seems like a really small buff, and maybe it's not gonna make a huge difference, and on that I gotta agree with you, because most of the time people tend to shoot at your weak spots rather than your whole gun mantlet, which should appear in the HUD completely red regardless of what kind of ammunition you are playing with. But from time to time, as it allowed some people to penetrate, it could ruin your game. Of course, if it happens with an object 140 and you only take 310 alpha damage, yes, it's frustrating because you're gonna be like, wow, how did this guy manage to penetrate me? But you're gonna be like, alright, I have 3.1k kill points, I don't mind that much, so I'm not gonna bother, and I'm gonna continue my game. But if it was an heavy 1A3 that penetrated you straight into the gun mantlet, trust me, you would not take it the same way as if it was an object 140, because here you would rage so hard because it's literally 1k damage taken unfairly simply over a balancing mistake Wargaming did while implementing those tanks. What I'm amazed about concerning that buff is that it took Wargaming so much freaking time to actually discover and find out about that bug. It had been known for a very long time. Of course, it was not a game-changing thing, and it was not really upsetting. It happened from time to time. Basically, with my mouse, I must have like 100 games, and it might have happened at least, yeah, let's say maybe 5 times. 5 times out of 100 battles. It was maybe not enough for Wargaming to really see it as a problem, but I don't know why all of a sudden they decided to patch it, and I'm glad they did. Because nowadays we finally have the super heavies Wargaming promised us. Therefore, mouse, VK, and 100 being the goats when it comes to gun handling and also gun mantlet, which is totally logic because that's exactly what we expect from those tanks. You know guys, Wargaming also buffed the VK9001P, and honestly when you take a look at it, it doesn't feel like it needed a buff on the gun mantlet because it seems like this tank doesn't have any gun mantlet. It just seems like a big old gun. And Wargaming still buff it. And I thought, you know why? You know what? Sorry. Why did they do that? Like, what was the problem with the VK? And I did one game where I understood. Let me show you briefly what's the problem with the gun mantlet. When you take a look at the VK, it seems impenetrable, at least on the turret, and that's what the tank was made for in the first place. But there is a separation, if you take a look, between the gun and the gun mantlet. And at this exact spot here, if you shot a shell on that little gray area you can see on between the gun itself and the gun mantlet, you could actually penetrate and do damage. Of course, it's one shot out of 1,000 that would go there. But still, it's quite upsetting for people because you are not supposed to penetrate that area. And so Wargaming decided, let's buff it, or it's not even a buff, let's make it how the tank intended to be like in the first place. And I don't really know how these kind of bugs happen in the game. Like, how is Wargaming not detecting those? I'm not even attacking them or anything. I'm just genuinely asking, because if that took them that number of years, because the VK91P have been implemented for 1 year, 1.5 years by now, if it took them 1.5 years to understand what was the problem, what are you working on, you know? Like, it's a little bit weird for me that Wargaming in the first place released the tank without understanding those problems. Or maybe they did, but they were in a rush because the VK91P was first released for Christmas and they really wanted the tank to be ready, and that's why they rushed it a little bit, which is totally understandable. I mean, that's a company, and that's the exact same for YouTubers. The moment of the year where we do the most money is around Christmas, because that's where you're getting paid a lot more. So I can understand Wargaming rushing those tanks for us to be able to play it, and I'm glad they did, because I wouldn't have liked waiting too much to play that tank and to get it in my hands. But basically, as a lot of people asked me what was the buff about, now guys, you have the answer. It's literally those small details about tanks that Wargaming intended to work on. Is it good? Of course it is. And it also shows that Wargaming really cares about those forgotten tanks, because even if it took a year for them to actually implement those new features, they did. It shows that they are not only occupied by implementing new lines like the TVP. No, they are also working on making the previous line as effective as they should be, and trying to make them competitive when you compare it to other tanks that are getting released. That's logic. That's really a nice gesture from Wargaming, and that's what differences. That's the main differences. I should say it like this. That's the main difference between World of Tanks PC and World of Tanks Blitz, because in Blitz they actually try to balance things out, even if from time to time, yes, we have a broken tank, and yes, that's logic, and unfortunately we can't do anything about that. But hey, get a look at what World of Tanks PC is turning on, and you're gonna love Blitz even more, and you're not necessarily gonna criticize them again. But hopefully that's what they change. Same for the E100. The gun mantlet that had a little problem, but nothing to be really excited about, and doesn't need a whole 8-minute video for me to explain that. Now you know what this buff was all about. Hope you enjoyed. If that's the case, feel free to subscribe, like, and share, and I'm gonna see you soon for a new video. Bye.